Hello adventurers, my name is Chance, welcome to my Spellbook, and thank you so much for tuning into the 7th episode of the Elf Subrace series. Man, do we have a real pain in the neck in store for you today. We're gonna be looking at Mark of the Shadow Elf, which was released in Eberron, Rising from the Last War. If you're not familiar with the marked races, I envy you. I remember when they were first released, a ton of my DM buddies were freaking out over them, and you know what, with good reason. There aren't a ton of DMs I'm aware of that have gone through someone trying to cheese one of the marked subraces and still use it, right? So usually DMs allow them until someone really tries to push them to their limits, and then they'll just outright ban them. I allow them in my game from time to time, although it does kind of depend with the group I'm in, and if I find they're cheesing them, then I'll just make a side note saying, listen, if you have to make a new character in the future, the Eberron races are off limits, and most people are usually okay with that. However, if everyone's using them, I think they're great, I think they're really fun, and I think they provide just a ton of utility to any character. Before we dive into their traits though, please check out the full playlist. At the very least, watch the Elf video so you kind of know everything that you get. All you need to do to check it out is just click on that little eye icon up top there and select races or elf from the drop down menu, and you should be all good to go. Now let's take a look at their traits. Out of the gate, you'll get a +1 to your charisma score, which is pretty dang handy. And you'll gain access to Cunning Intuition. When you make a performance or stealth check, you can roll a d4 and add the number rolled to the ability check. Something I want to point out here and be really clear about. There's no limit on how many times you can use this. It also doesn't consume anything in terms of action, bonus action, reaction, nada. This is essentially just a free d4 to any stealth or performance check you need to make. That's pause for concern, in my opinion, and once again, very cheesable. However, at higher levels it becomes less and less relevant, although at those early levels it puts you at this absurd advantage. Now let's move on to their other traits. You'll also gain access to Shape Shadows. You know the Minor Illusion cantrip. Starting at 3rd level, you can cast the invisibility spell once with this trait, and you regain your ability to cast it when you finish a long rest. Charisma is your ability modifier for these spells. Minor Illusion is one of those spells that is arguably one of the more useful cantrips from a utility angle. While it might not be able to start fires or do anything in the real world, it could legitimately save your neck pretty hardcore, and I want to say it's one of the most commonly chosen cantrips in the game. Outside of that though, invisibility is absolutely fantastic at any level of play. These are really unique spells in the way that there's no particular level where they're not viable, and there's no particular situation where they're not viable either. Whether you're in combat, in a social setting, or exploring, you'll find benefit with both of these spells, and that's pretty incredible. The fact that Charisma is your spellcasting ability modifier is kind of meh. It's nice because you do get access to that +1 Charisma in the beginning, but outside of that, it is fine. And if you thought that was all, you'd be wrong. You also gain access to Spells of the Mark. All this is just an expansion on the spell list, very similar to how the Ravnican backgrounds work. So you can't just cast these all willy-nilly, you do need to sacrifice spell slots to get them. But if you are a caster that wouldn't normally have access to any of these, you now have access to all of them. This is especially cheesable by the Warlock or the Sorcerer, which have alternative ways of either getting their spell slots back or get all of them back on the short rests, though they have a far more flexibility. So in terms of 1st level spells, you'll gain access to Disguise Self and Silent Image. 2nd level, you'll gain access to Darkness and Pass Without Trace. At 3rd level, you'll gain access to Clairvoyance and Major Image. At 4th level, Greater Invisibility and Hallucinatory Terrain. And 5th level, Mislead. All of these are great spells, just plain and simple. Some of them may be less useful based on what class you're playing and what class features you get. However, in general, they're all pretty fantastic. Notable ones include Pass Without Trace is pretty cool. Essentially, if you combine this with your presumably already decent stealth score and that 1d4 you can roll at the very beginning through Cunning Intuition, the odds of you getting caught or seen or noticed or even remotely discovered are very, very thin. Really incredible. And in addition to that, Major Image is fantastic as well. Clairvoyance is great if you're playing a spy character. Greater Invisibility is one of those spells where I like it, although I find relative to a couple of the other 5th level spells, it kind of falls short. And I've never actually seen anyone use Hallucinatory Terrain, ever, actually. I've read through the spell a couple times, thought it was interesting, but for whatever reason, relative to a lot of those other 4th level spells, it kind of falls flat. Mislead, however, is messed up. If you've never gone through it, what it does is it makes you invisible, which doesn't sound super cool, but what it also does is it creates a identical copy of you where you would be standing otherwise. It's not real, but you can perceive through its senses, and you can use your action to animate it. It's really cool. It's like discount simulacrum, if you want to look at it that way. It's interesting. Makes for a lot of cool opportunities. Kind of a cross between invisibility and Major Image, if you want to look at it that way. Really cool stuff. Needless to say, there's some really good choices here. Now let's get on to my personal thoughts. It's really difficult for me to talk about the marked races in general. Mark of the Shadow Elf is, of course, no exception. And the reason for that is they've been such a highly contested point of 5e amongst the Dungeons & Dragons DM community that I feel bad praising them a little bit. But if I'm looking at it objectively, they're all fantastic. They all lend themselves to a very specific playstyle. In the Mark of the Shadow Elf's case, it's being a stealthy character, and literally everything they have is meant to help you infiltrate, destroy, and make it seem like somebody else did it, you know? The +1 to charisma is really nice. Is it the best thing about this? Heck no, but it still is nice. Charisma is one of those ability scores that you always want to have, especially if you're planning on having any form of social engagement. Low charisma characters, they can be fun to play, but if you're playing in a long-term campaign, you don't want to feel like you're dragging everyone else down. Cunning Intuition, on the other hand, is bloody fantastic. The ability to just roll an extra d4 at your leisure without any resource cost or expending any time is incredible. While I understand that a d4 isn't a huge number, at those early couple levels where your proficiency bonus isn't super high and maybe your ability scores are relatively low, that could save your neck. This is also useful if you're playing a character in heavy armor and you have disadvantage on your stealth checks. There's just a lot you can do with this. Stealth is by far one of the most useful ability checks in the game, and performance is probably right up there as well. Shape Shadows is fantastic. Gaining minor illusion out of the gate just because, it's going to help you out a lot, no matter what class you're playing as. Invisibility as well. It's just a good spell, just a really solid spell from the ground up. And you can cast it without using any spell slots. The only caveat is it takes a long rest to reset it once you do, but if you time it correctly, you'll only need to use it once to escape from combat unseen, or pickpocket or what have you. It's meant to be used when you feel like it's needed most, and that should only really be once a session, and you usually take a long rest at the end of each session, so yeah. Their spell list extension is overall quite good. It's a little disappointing that it doesn't have any damage dealing spells in there, but once again, all of the marked subraces, they're aimed at a very specific playstyle, and this is more of a stealthy approach, more espionage, things of that nature. So it makes sense that there's no damage here. In short, if you're playing a stealthy character and if you want to test out this less direct playstyle, Mark of the Shadow Elf is perfect for you. That being said, there might be some other options that might suit your tastes a little bit better, and make sure to check out the playlist for that. Of course, we'll be going over all the races and all of the sub-races. But yeah, let me know what you guys think down beneath in the comments section. Mention any thoughts, questions, comments, or concerns you have regarding Mark of the Shadow Elf. Do you think I overhyped it? I don't think that I did, but who knows. If you have any experience with the marked races, let me know down beneath in general. That being said, I actually have a pretty cool announcement for later today, so just keep an ear out for that. And yeah, that being said, have a great day everyone, and as always, happy adventuring.